Hi everyone, my name is Nick Leahy, chef owner of X and Tinted here in West Midtown, and we're excited to bring you the celebration of the tomato menu here with Feed ATL. So it's the peak of the tomato season. Our tomato season in Georgia, as you can see, produces some really beautiful specimens. These are all from Bill Yoder, who we call the Tomato Whisperer. He's a crazy old dude. Well, he's not crazy old. He's crazy, comma old. But he crossbreeds his own variety, so he's producing types of tomatoes that you can't get anywhere else other than his farm. So what we thought we'd do was show a couple different ways, interesting ways to use the tomato, because let's face it, if I did a tomato salad, you guys are perfectly capable of just slicing a tomato up at home. So we thought we'd try to do something a little bit more interesting. So our first dish is going to be a fresh shiitake mushroom pappardelle with heirloom tomatoes, basil flowers from my own personal garden, a little bit of slivered garlic, white wine, and butter. So it's a simple dish, but we're going to use the tomatoes to cook down first to make the sauce, and then also add fresh at the end, so you get sort of a dual type of tomato or a dual use of tomato, so it really helps celebrate the tomato flavor up. So before you even get started, fresh pasta, we all know, cooks incredibly quickly, so you want to have your water up at a rolling boil. And you want to have salt in your water. Don't listen to any of those people and tell you to do stupid things like boil your water or anything like that. It's nothing but a waste of oil. All you need is nice seasoned water, so make sure your water tastes like the ocean and you're ready to cook it. And then we're going to go into our pan here. So the first thing we're going to do is put on our mask. And then we'll get started. So we're going to put a little bit of olive oil in our pan. You can be pretty generous with it, because we're going to kind of use both the olive oil and the butter to help make the emulsion in the sauce. And you want to have it on pretty high heat to get us started here. So we have a little bit of sliced shallot. That's going to go in. And we're going to let this just sort of stir around and let them sweat out until they get translucent. We don't want to get too much color on them, because we don't want them to start getting bitter, but we just want them to soften up and get a little bit caramelized, so we develop some of that sweetness. And you don't want to season the dish at all yet, because if we added salt to this, that would just draw the moisture out of the shallot, and then you wouldn't get any caramelization. It would just sort of steam in the pan. Alright, and you can see the shallots are starting to get translucent, and some of the edges are just starting to lightly brown. That's exactly what we're going for. We don't want to really put deep color on these, because the point of the sauce is to celebrate this really bright, fresh tomato, so we don't want to put too many deep flavors that would hide that too much. Next, we're going to go in with our slivered garlic. I like a lot of garlic. You can use as much as you like, but I like to go heavy. It goes well with the tomato anyway. And with them sliced so thin, and us sauteing them and deglazing, it'll take away any of that sort of hot garlic flavor, and you'll just be left with that sort of mellow, sweet garlic flavor anyway. As soon as those go in, they'll be pretty ready to go. And you're going to want to use the larger container of tomatoes for the sauce building, and then the smaller container of tomatoes will be sort of our garnished tomatoes. Keeping this on high heat the whole time. Just give it a toss around to the oil, and you can see immediately the tomatoes start breaking down and mixing with that oil. That's sort of forming the basis of our sauce. And at this point, since we do want to start drawing some of the moisture out, you can go ahead and give it the first pinch of salt. You always want to sort of season in stages in a dish, as opposed to just adding it at the end. You'll actually end up using less salt that way. Now we're going to hit it with just a little bit of wine. And as soon as this cooks off, we can drop our pasta, and then we'll finish the sauce. I like using the two-color tomatoes, because that way you get one color for the base of the sauce, and you get a little bit of visual contrast in the dish that way as well. Now we can throw in a little bit of chives. And we'll go ahead and drop our pasta. We've done a pappardelle, so it's a nice thick fat noodle, sort of holds the sauce well for tomato sauce like this. Just as you're going, we floured it pretty well for you, but just make sure you sort of shake it out as you drop it so it doesn't cook in one big clump. And then just sort of give it a shake around. Now we're just going to go in It's a French restaurant, right? So it's got to have a little butter in it. Butter makes it better. Just sort of toss that through. And now that you've got your butter in there, lower your heat just to about medium-high and just keep swirling. If you just let it sit, it could break a little bit, and then you'd have to bring a tomato with butter sauce. If you do it this way, it'll emulsify together, and you'll have a really nice sort of rich tomato sauce. It's got nice acid from the tomatoes, but a really nice, luscious, rich mouthfeel. You can see as this butter starts to froth and foam, that's where it's nearly almost all melted and emulsified in there. So we can go ahead and cut our heat off. Then we're going to take a little bit of the basil flowers and throw them in. We're going to go ahead and toss in our pasta as well. We want to pull the pasta even though it's fresh, still when it's a little bit al dente, because that way we can finish cooking the pasta in our sauce too. And I did the shiitake mushroom in the pasta dough itself because that sort of adds a nice sort of earthy tone, plays against the sweetness and the acid of the tomato, gives you sort of multiple taste points of the dish. Alright, you can see the bubbles have gotten nice and thick here. That's a sign that your sauce is at the sort of right texture and it's time to plate. So just try to get all your noodles out first. Sort of pile them nicely in the middle of the bowl. It's a rustic dish, so you don't need to be too fancy with it. And then take all your the goodies that are in there, the garlic, the cooked down tomatoes, a little bits of basil, and just try to pile them on top of the pasta. Like so. And then we're going to take all of our fresh tomatoes, just garnish them right on top like that. And a couple more of the basil flowers. Just spread them around. The nice thing about this Greek basil is it's really aromatic, but it's really nice and tender too, so you don't have to chop it up and get that nice visual. Alright, so there we go. Great way to start your celebration of the tomato season meal. Fresh mushroom, shiitake mushroom pappardelle with tomatoes to lace. Enjoy yours. Alright, and now we're on to the next dish, the entree of our tomato celebration. So what we're going to do is a chicken sofrito. So we're going to use Springer Mountain chicken. This is half a bird. We have some caipirinha peppers, which are a really nice pepper. They have a good little bit of heat, but they're not crazy. Then we've cut our tomatoes a little bit bigger this time, so they stand up in the braising process and don't totally disappear. We've got some beautiful little variety heirloom tomatoes from Rogers Greens and Roots. We have some oyster mushrooms and then just some shallots. So we have the pan on sort of medium-high heat, and we're going to put a little oil in there and let the oil start heating up. And now, we're going to take our chicken, pop it in the bowl here, add a nice healthy seasoning of salt, and then dredge it with flour. Just sort of give it a toss around. You don't have to go too OCD on this. Just try to make sure you have most of it dredged, because it'll help getting the part that we leave above the braising liquid to stay crispy. But then the other thing it does is it helps thicken our sauce as well. So that's why we want to have it in there. So now we've got our pan ready. Chicken slot. Go in with the skin side down on breast and thigh. And try to find the widest, flattest part of the drum and put that down, because we're going to use that for the presentation side. And then the same for the wing, you want to use the wide flat section there too. Alright, so we've had our chicken searing for about 3 minutes now. You can see we've got a nice little bit of color, we've got a good little bit of texture on the crust there. Now it's time to flip it over. And we can start adding our vegetables. So first thing, we'll go with the shallot. Just sort of break them up around the pan a little bit. And then we'll go in with our peppers. Again, you can be in control of how spicy you want the dish. We're going to be adding butter and stock and things like that, so I'd like to have a fair amount in there, but up to you again. Now our oyster mushrooms. We We're going to send them to you like this, just because they hold better that way. But as you're going into the pan, just sort of break them off into individual mushrooms. If one or two stick together, it's not a big deal. You don't have to like reach into the cast iron pan and burn your fingers. But this way, they'll just have an opportunity to each get a little bit of color as they stick together. And just try to get it so most of the veggies have a little surface contact with the pan, so they can start browning down. And then the tomatoes, we actually don't want to necessarily be browning, because we're going to use those to give off some tomato into the sauce so you get the flavor throughout the dish, but then also not cook them as much so that they hold their shape in the final dish. We don't want them to just melt into nothing. So we're just going to give this about another minute and a half to sear the other side of the chicken, and then we'll start building our sauce. So if you look in the pan here, you can start to see the shallots are getting translucent, the mushrooms have got a little bit of browning on them, the peppers are getting a little bit of caramelization like that. So that means we've built a little bit of fond in the bottom, so now it's time to go to the next step. So the wine goes in first. You want to turn the heat up nice and hot right before you do this, that way you get a good deglaze. And just pour it right in the middle. Just cook it so you can't sort of smell that raw alcohol flavor as much. And at no point do we want to cover the top of our chicken. So we just sort of want to get the liquid up to sort of 3/4 of the level. That way we get really nice tender from the wet cooking, but we retain that nice crispy top so you get a little bit of textural contact. So our wine's cooked off now. We have this is a mushroom and chicken stock, so you get a little bit of cool flavor building this way. Go in with that and just watch to make sure you're just coming up to that level that I talked about for the chicken. We're going to take a few more, a little bit of basil, just sprinkle them around. And then our potatoes. And these will just sort of rest on top. They'll pick up a little bit of the juice. They'll get a little bit of roast from the oven, so they get a little caramelization this way. Tiny sprinkle of salt. And now we're ready to go. Our oven's on 500 degrees, ready to go. That's what you want to be doing. Now we have a convection oven, so it's going to take probably about 8 or 10 minutes in our convection oven. If you have just a regular oven, maybe 12 to 14 minutes at 500 degrees, we'll be ready to go. All right, I think it's time to check our chicken. See, beautiful. We've got nice color on the potatoes. The tomatoes are roasted down. Our sauce is thickened a little bit. Let's go back to the stove. All right, so now we're just going to finish this with a couple pats of butter, just to give a little bit more richness to the sauce. Couple is, relative. Just give it a shake around so your butter gets down in there. Garnish with a little bit more herb. As soon as that butter sort of melted down into the sauce, we're ready to go. And you can see why we left the tomatoes nice and big. That way, even after they've been in the oven for this long, you still see they have some nice texture and they've held their shape. That way you'll still be able to really taste the tomato, but it's still given a lot of its juice into the pan sauce. So you'll taste it both ways, which is the goal. If you're doing a tomato celebration menu, you should be able to taste the tomato in it, right? All right, and now we're ready to plate. So what we're going to do first is just sort of dig out all of our veggies, lay them down. take our chicken, lay it nicely on top. And we'll finish with the sauce. The key here is we've done all this work to make the chicken stay nice and crispy on top, even though we're doing wet cooking. So what you don't want to do is take your sauce and just dump it all over the top, because then you'll get soggy chicken again, and that would negate everything you've done. So just come to the side of your dish and pour your sauce in and let it spread so it gets into all those veggies underneath, but again, it doesn't get to the top of your chicken. And then just because I have so much growing in the garden, we're going to finish it with a little bit more of the basil. Basil and tomatoes are a classic combination, so why not? There you have it. A little summertime tomato chicken dish. A sofrito chicken with heirloom potatoes, heirloom tomatoes, and a little mushroom chicken broth. Enjoy. All right, and now to wrap up our tomato celebration, I figured after a long meal or a long night of cooking your first two courses, I'd keep dinner pretty simple for you guys. So what we've done is just make a little peanut butter panna cotta. Yours will come exactly like this. It just might not be in a fancy little container. It'll be in some disposable, but you can eat it right out of the container. And then we just have a little salted tomato caramel. So we took fresh tomatoes, roasted them, pureed them, passed them off so there's no skin or seed or anything like that. And then we just pulled that into a salted caramel right at the end of cooking. You don't necessarily really taste a ton of tomato, but what you get is sort of that sort of acid and that back sweetness and everything like that. So if you're looking for it, it's there. If you weren't looking for it, you might not get it, but I think it's a nice way to show the versatility of tomatoes. So all you want to do is just take a nice couple dollops, smear it all over the top of your panna cotta. And then this is so good, I'll even show you how to eat it. Well, thank you guys. I hope you guys have enjoyed the celebration of tomato. Appreciate it. Have a good one.